What happens when the man who has everything decides it's not enough? Evander Cross, a titan of industry with a 9-figure net worth, had a life most people could only dream of: a stunning penthouse overlooking Central Park and a brilliant, beautiful wife, Katharina, who was pregnant with their first child. He was on top of the world. But in the shadows of his perfect life, he made a promise of another world, another future, to a woman who wasn't his wife. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a story of greed betrayal, and the moment it all came crashing down, the moment his pregnant wife found the one secret that could destroy him, a Swiss bank account holding the key to his double life. The city of New York glittered below the penthouse apartment like a carpet of scattered diamonds. From the 68th floor of 157, the world seemed not just conquerable, but already conquered. This was Evander Cross's domain. At 38, he possessed the kind of confident, predatory grace that came from building an empire from scratch. His company, Lyceum Dynamics, had revolutionized data security, making him a demigod in the tech world and a very, very wealthy man. His face, a handsome assembly of sharp angles and intense dark eyes, was a regular feature in Forbes and Wired. He had the Midas touch, and everything he touched turned to polished, marketable gold. His greatest acquisition, however, was not a company, but a woman. Katharina Cross-née Vander Woodson was the living embodiment of quiet, old-world elegance. Her family's money was ancient, smelling of mahogany and leather-bound books, a stark contrast to Evander's new electric-scented fortune. They had met at a charity gala where Evander was the keynote speaker and Katharina was the event chair. He was captivated by her poise, her sharp intelligence, and the way she commanded a room without ever raising her voice. She, in turn, was drawn to his raw ambition, the untamed energy that buzzed just beneath his tailored Tom Ford suit. Their union was the talk of Manhattan, the self-made disruptor, and the society heiress. A modern-day fairy tale. Now, 4 years into their marriage, the fairy tale was about to welcome a new chapter. Katharina was 6 months pregnant with their son, a child who would inherit Evander's drive and the Vander Woodson legacy. She was radiant, her usually slender frame softened by the gentle curve of her belly. Tonight, she stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, one hand resting protectively on her bump, watching the city lights blur into a watercolor masterpiece. "He's kicking again," she said, her voice a soft melody that always managed to soothe the frantic hum in Evander's brain. "I think he's going to be a soccer player, or a professional boxer." Evander came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her and placing his hands over hers on her stomach. He rested his chin on her shoulder, inhaling the familiar, comforting scent of her Chanel No. 5. "A CEO like his old man," he murmured into her hair. "He'll be a builder, Ellie, like me. We'll teach him how to build empires." She smiled, leaning back into his embrace. "Let's teach him how to be a good man first. The empires can wait." It was the perfect moment in their perfect life. A life of curated perfection, from the abstract expressionist paintings on the walls to the Michelin-starred meals prepared by their private chef. It was a fortress of wealth and happiness, impenetrable and gleaming. But even the strongest fortresses have secret passages, and Evander was a man who had mastered the art of building them. His secret passage had a name, Isabella Rossi. He had met her 3 months prior. It was a rainy Tuesday, and Evander had ducked into a small avant-garde art gallery in Chelsea to escape a sudden downpour. The gallery was stark white, the art challenging and provocative. And then he saw her. Isabella was explaining a chaotic, vibrant canvas to a potential buyer. She was a stark contrast to Katharina's cool blonde beauty. Isabella was all fire and passion, with a mane of dark curly hair, expressive hands that danced as she spoke, and eyes that held a hint of wildness. She managed the gallery, but it was clear she had ambitions that stretched far beyond its white walls. Evander, an investor in art, but rarely a connoisseur of it, found himself utterly captivated. He waited until her client left. "You have a gift," he said, his voice making her jump. "You don't just sell the art. You make them feel it." Isabella turned, her dark eyes assessing him in an instant. She recognized him, of course. Who in New York wouldn't? A small, knowing smile played on her lips. "Art is meant to be felt, Mr. Cross. Otherwise, it's just expensive decoration. Call me Evander." That was how it started. A conversation about art turned into a 2-hour discussion over coffee. Coffee turned into clandestine lunches. Lunches bled into late-afternoon trysts in a boutique hotel in Soho that he'd booked under a false name. With Katharina, his life was a meticulously planned symphony. With Isabella, it was improvised jazz, unpredictable, thrilling, and dangerously seductive. She didn't care about his stock prices or his board meetings. She cared about his passions, his fears, the man he was before he became a brand. She saw the restless hunger in him that Katharina had sought to soothe, and instead of calming it, she fed it. "You're trapped in a golden cave, Evander," she'd whispered to him one afternoon, her fingers tracing the tense line of his jaw. They were in their hotel room, the city noise a distant hum. A beautiful, perfect cage. But a cage nonetheless. He didn't deny it. In fact, he found the idea exhilarating. He was the master of the universe, yet she saw him as a captive. It was a narrative that absolved him of his guilt. He wasn't betraying Katharina. He was escaping a gilded prison. The promises began as whispers, sweet nothings in the dark. But with a man like Evander, whispers had a way of becoming blueprints. "I want to see the world with you," he told her, scrolling through pictures on his phone. "Not the world of boardrooms and charity balls. The real world. A villa in Tuscany overlooking a vineyard. We could wake up to the sunrise, drink wine, and forget what day it is." Isabella's eyes gleamed. "That sounds like a dream." "It doesn't have to be," he said, his voice low and serious. "I can make it happen." He started to paint a picture of a future for her, a masterpiece of deceit. He told her he and Katharina were more like business partners now that the spark had faded long ago. The baby, he explained with a pained expression he'd practiced in the mirror, was a last-ditch attempt to save something that was already broken. "I can't leave her now. Not while she's pregnant," he'd say, the picture of a tortured, honorable man. "But after the baby is born, things will change. I'll make sure she's taken care of. But my future, my happiness, that's with you, Bella." She believed him. Every word. Why wouldn't she? He was Evander Cross. He didn't just make promises, he issued decrees. He started sending her gifts, not just jewelry and clothes, but things that spoke to their shared future. A first-edition copy of a book on Tuscan architecture. A rare bottle of Brunello from a vineyard near the very spot he claimed he wanted to buy land. He was building a second life as meticulously as he had built his first. He compartmentalized with chilling efficiency. He would leave Isabella's arms shower away her scent and go home to his pregnant wife, slipping back into the role of doting husband without missing a beat. He'd feel the baby kick under his palm and feel a surge of genuine love and excitement, even as the ghost of Isabella's touch lingered on his skin. He loved Katharina, he told himself. He did. But what he had with Isabella was different. It was passion. It was life. It was the one thing his money couldn't buy, in the open market, a rebellion against the perfect life he had so carefully constructed. One evening, about a month after meeting Isabella, he was working late in his home office. The space was his sanctuary, a minimalist room with a panoramic view of the city he'd conquered. Katharina was asleep, and the penthouse was silent. He was supposed to be reviewing quarterly reports, but his mind was elsewhere. It was on Isabella, on Tuscany, on the intoxicating, terrifying idea of a life lived on his own terms. He knew that to make this second life a reality, he needed more than just whispered promises. He needed resources. He needed a war chest, a fund completely off the books, invisible to the prying eyes of his company's auditors, and more importantly, his wife. Katharina, for all her quiet grace, was no fool. Her family had taught her to read a balance sheet as easily as she read novels. Their finances were largely intertwined, a web of trusts and joint accounts. He opened a secure, encrypted browser on his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating to the discreet home page of a revered Swiss institution, UBS. He'd used them before for sensitive corporate acquisitions. They were the ghosts of the banking world, silent, efficient, and above all, discreet. He began the process of opening a new private wealth account. He funneled an initial $10 million into it, siphoned from a holding company, so obscure it would take a forensic accountant months to trace. It was a complex web of transactions designed to be invisible. For the account name, he paused. This wasn't just a collection of numbers. It was a symbol of his intent. It was his escape hatch, his new beginning. He typed in the name Project Renaissance. He hit Enter. The transfer was confirmed. There it was, a secret, a $10 million secret, hidden in the digital vaults of a bank thousands of miles away, a testament to a future he was building in the shadows of his marriage. He leaned back in his leather chair, the city lights reflecting in his dark, triumphant eyes. He felt a thrill, a jolt of power that was more potent than any billion-dollar deal. He had it all. The perfect wife, the child on the way, the adoring mistress, and a secret nest egg to fund his fantasy. Evander Cross, the master builder, surveyed his two empires, one built in the light, the other in the dark. He was convinced he could keep them separate. He was sure he could have both. It was his greatest miscalculation. Because in the silence of the penthouse, his pregnant wife, the woman he thought he could manage, was beginning to sense the subtle tectonic shifts of his betrayal. The foundations of their golden cage were starting to crack. The following weeks saw Evander descend deeper into his double life, operating with the clinical precision of a master spy. His days were a carefully orchestrated ballet of deception. A board dinner was a candlelit meal with Isabella at a secluded French bistro in the West Village. A weekend business retreat in Boston was a passionate, sun-drenched 48 hours with her in a private villa in Miami. He bought a second phone, a burner, its existence a secret known only to him and Isabella. It lived in the inner pocket of his briefcase, a cold, hard rectangle of duplicity. For Isabella, the dream was becoming tangible. Evander was no longer speaking in hypotheticals. He was acting. One afternoon, he presented her with a thick, leather-bound portfolio. Inside were architectural renderings of a breathtaking Tuscan villa, complete with an infinity pool, a sprawling artist studio for her, and a wine cellar that could hold 1,000 bottles. The firm listed on the blueprints, Studio Bianchi, was one of Italy's most exclusive architectural designers. They're waiting for my final approval on the land survey. Evander said, his voice casual, as if discussing the weather. I've put a deposit down on a plot just south of Montalcino. The view is, well, you'll see. Isabella's hands trembled as she traced the lines of the drawing. It was real. This wasn't just pillow talk. It was a multi-million-dollar plan set in motion. Evander, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, he whispered, pulling her close. Just be ready. He even began investing in her. He encouraged her to leave her job at the Chelsea Gallery to start drafting a business plan for her own much grander space. Gallery Rossi, he called it. We'll find the perfect spot in Soho. I'll be your silent partner, your first and only investor. He transferred $250,000 from Project Renaissance into her personal account. The memo line read seed funding. It was a gesture that cemented her trust completely. He wasn't just her lover, he was her patron, her champion. He was building her future, and by extension, their future. While Evander was constructing this fantasy life, the architect of his real life, Katharina, was beginning to notice the flaws in his design. It wasn't one big thing, but 1,000 tiny, almost imperceptible shifts. It was the way he'd started guarding his phone, angling it away from her when he typed. It was the faint, unfamiliar scent of a floral perfume, not her Chanel, that clung to his shirt one evening. He'd blamed it on a hug from an overzealous female colleague, but the explanation felt flimsy rehearsed. There were the unexplained expenses on his credit card statements, which she usually reviewed. A charge for a 2-night stay at the Setai in Miami, when he was supposed to be at a conference in Boston. When she'd questioned it, he'd smoothly explained that the conference location was changed at the last minute, and he'd forgotten to tell her. He was a master of the plausible lie, the quick pivot, the confident deflection that made her feel almost foolish for asking. The real change, however, was in his eyes. When he looked at her now, there was a flicker of something she couldn't name. A distance. He was physically present, his hand on her swollen belly, his voice murmuring the right words about their son. But a part of him was absent, logged into a different server. The intimacy that had once been the bedrock of their marriage now felt like a performance. He was playing the part of the devoted husband, but she could hear the hollow echo in his lines. Pregnancy had heightened her senses, made her intuition a razor-sharp instrument. She started to pay closer attention. She cross-referenced his calendar with his credit card bills. The business dinner at a steakhouse in Midtown didn't match the charge from a tiny Italian place downtown. The dates were close, but not exact. It was sloppy. For a man as meticulous as Evander's sloppiness was a red flag. Her suspicions were a cold, coiling serpent in her gut. She hated the feeling. It was ugly, corrosive. She tried to dismiss it as hormonal paranoia, the anxiety of a first-time mother. Evander was under immense pressure at work. Of course he was distracted. She was being unfair. She tried to reconnect with him. One night she cooked his favorite meal herself, giving their chef the night off. She lit candles and put on the music from their wedding. She wanted to find her husband again, the man she'd married, not the polished, distant CEO, who now sat across from her. "Is everything okay, Evander?" she asked, her voice gentle. "You seem far away lately." He gave her a perfect, reassuring smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Everything's perfect, Ellie. Just buried in work. The new merger is a beast." He reached across the table and took her hand. His skin was warm, but the gesture felt disconnected. "Don't you worry about a thing. Just focus on growing our boy in there. He was placating her, patronizing her. And in that moment, Katharina knew. She didn't know the who or the where, but she knew the what. The serpent of suspicion in her stomach was no longer a feeling. It was a certainty, and it was hungry for the truth. The moment of discovery came on a quiet Saturday morning. Evander was out for a run in Central Park, a ritual he never missed. Katharina, unable to sleep, found herself in his home office. The room was bathed in the soft morning light, the city still waking up below. She was looking for a document related to the baby's trust fund, something she knew Evander kept in a file on his desktop. His laptop was open on the large oak desk. He'd forgotten to lock it. It was another uncharacteristically sloppy mistake. Her heart began to beat a little faster. She sat down in his chair, the leather still warm from him. She found the folder for the trust fund easily enough, but her eyes were drawn to another folder on the desktop. It was cryptically named Personal Ventures. She clicked on it. A password prompt appeared. Her breath hitched. This was it. This was the locked door she'd sensed for months. Her mind raced through possible passwords. Their anniversary. Too obvious. His mother's maiden name. His dog's name from childhood. All incorrect. She felt a surge of frustration, then a wave of cold clarity. Evander was a creature of ego and ambition. His passwords wouldn't be sentimental. They would be symbolic of his own journey. She thought back to the stories he'd told her when they were first dating, the stories of his struggles before he made it big. His first startup, a spectacular failure before he created Lyceum Dynamics. It was called Icarus. He'd told her it was a lesson in humility, a reminder of what happened when you flew too close to the sun. She typed it in ICARUS. The folder opened. It wasn't filled with love letters or illicit photos. It was something far colder, far more damning. It was a list of files, bank statements, wire transfers, architectural plans. Her hands were shaking now. She clicked on the most recent bank statement. The logo at the top of the PDF made her blood run cold. UBS, a Swiss bank. An account she had never heard of. The account holder's name was listed as a shell corporation she didn't recognize, but beneath it, the designation was clear: Project Renaissance. The balance displayed at the bottom of the page made her gasp. There were over $20 million in the account, an entirely separate fortune hidden from her, from everyone. She frantically clicked on another file, a list of wire transfers. Her eyes scanned the page, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Recipient Studio Bianchi Florence. Amount £500,000. Memo Tuscan Villa Deposit. Recipient Isabella Rossi. Amount $250,000. Memo Seed Funding. Recipient The Setai Miami. Amount $15. 780. Memo Villa Rental. Isabella Rossi. The name was unfamiliar, yet it felt like a physical blow. A woman's name. Seed funding. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. The lies, the distances, the secret, trips, the unfamiliar perfume. It wasn't just an affair. It was a parallel life. He wasn't just cheating on her. He was planning an exit. A new life with this Isabella Rossi, funded by their money built on the foundations of his lies. The architectural plans were the final brutal confirmation. She opened the file and saw the same Tuscan villa he had once described to her as a hypothetical dream years ago. Our dream house, Ellie, he had called it. Only now it had an artist's studio. for Isabella. The air left her lungs. The perfect, gleaming fortress of their marriage crumbled around her, revealing the rotten, treacherous ground it had been built on. The pain was sharp, physical, a white-hot blade twisting in her chest. But beneath the pain, something else was stirring, a cold, hard fury. Catherine was a Vander Woodson. Her ancestors had not built their fortune by crumbling in the face of betrayal. They had built it by being smarter, colder, and more ruthless than their enemies. And Evander Cross had just made himself her enemy. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Her grief and her rage crystallized into a singular, icy purpose. She methodically began to save every file from the Personal Ventures folder onto a small encrypted USB drive she kept in her purse. The bank statements, the wire transfers, the blueprints, the emails he'd exchanged with the architects, every single piece of evidence. She worked quickly, her movements precise. When she was done, she deleted the folder from the recent files list and closed the laptop, leaving it exactly as she had found it. She walked out of the office, the USB drive feeling heavy in her pocket, a tiny data bomb waiting to detonate. She went to the nursery, a beautiful room painted in soft blues and whites, a mobile of silver stars hanging over the empty crib. She stood there for a long time, one hand on her belly, feeling the strong, steady kicks of her son. This was no longer just about a broken heart. This was about protecting her child, protecting his future, his legacy from the man who was willing to gamble it all away for a fantasy. When Evander returned from his run, flushed and energized, he found her sitting in the living room, calmly sipping a cup of decaffeinated tea. "Morning, beautiful," he said, kissing the top of her head. "The park was incredible today. You and I should take the baby for walks there every morning." She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "That sounds lovely, darling," she said, her voice smooth as glass. He had no idea. He was looking at his perfectly composed, pregnant wife, and he didn't see the woman who had just uncovered his entire shadow life. He didn't see the strategist. He didn't see the adversary. He saw the one person he thought he could always control. And as he walked away to shower, Catherine allowed a small, cold smile to touch her lips. The game had changed. He just didn't know he was playing it yet. Catherine spent the next 48 hours in a state of chillingly calm preparation. The initial shock had subsided, replaced by a glacial resolve. She was a general preparing for war. She did not confront Evander. Instead, she let him continue his charade, watching his every move with new, all-seeing eyes. She listened to his plausible lies about late meetings and business trips, nodding serenely, all the while knowing his real itinerary. The knowledge was a suit of armor. Her first call was not to a divorce lawyer, but to her father. Arthur Vander Woodson was a retired investment banker, a man who moved through the world with the quiet lethality of a shark. He was a patriarch from a bygone era, and his love for his daughter was fierce and absolute. They met in the private library of his Upper East Side townhouse, a room that smelled of old money and power. Without shedding a single tear, Catherine laid out the situation. She handed him the encrypted USB drive. "He has a second life, Daddy, a mistress, and he's been using marital assets to fund it." Arthur listened in stony silence, his steepled fingers the only sign of his tension. He scrolled through the contents of the drive on his laptop, his expression hardening with every file he opened. The UBS statements, the wire transfers to Isabella Rossi, the Tuscan villa. When he was done, he closed the laptop and looked at his daughter. He didn't offer empty platitudes or comforting hugs. He offered strategy. "The first thing we do is secure your position," he said, his voice a low growl. "This isn't about emotion, Katharina. This is a business transaction, a hostile takeover of your future. We need the best, not just a lawyer, a killer." The killer's name was Victoria Hayes. She was a legend in the world of high-stakes divorce, a woman known for dismantling the empires of cheating husbands and securing settlements that made headlines. Her office was a fortress of steel and glass in Midtown. Katharina, with her father by her side, presented the evidence to Victoria. The lawyer's eyes, sharp and intelligent, lit up as she examined the files. "Cross has been very, very stupid," she said, a hint of predatory delight in her voice. "This offshore account. This is the smoking gun. He's not just an adulterer. He's committed financial fraud against the marital estate. This is beautiful." Victoria's advice was counterintuitive but brilliant. "Do nothing," she instructed. "Don't let him know you know. We wait. We let him transfer more money. We let him dig his own grave a little deeper. The more he commits to this Project Renaissance, the more you are entitled to when we strike." Meanwhile, Evander, oblivious, was escalating his promises to Isabella. He felt the birth of his son approaching like a deadline, a final hurdle, before he could begin his real life. His guilt was assuaged by the millions he was setting aside. He was being honorable, he told himself. He would leave Katharina a wealthy woman. He flew Isabella to Paris for a weekend. He bought her a Cartier bracelet, its diamonds sparkling under the lights of the Eiffel Tower. "This is just the beginning," he promised, his voice thick with sincerity. "Soon this will be our life. No more hiding." Isabella, emboldened by his promises and the growing balance in her bank account, was becoming impatient. She had drafted the business plan for her gallery. She had scouted locations. She was ready. "When Evander," she pressed. "When are you going to tell her?" "Soon, Bella. After the baby is born. The timing has to be perfect. For everyone." His perfect timing was about to be ripped from his hands. Katharina, following Victoria's counsel, waited for 2 more weeks. 2 weeks of polite dinners, of feigned interest in his work, of placing his hand on her belly to feel their son kick. It was the performance of her life. The day of the confrontation arrived. It was a Tuesday. Evander had just returned home from work, whistling. He'd just closed a major deal and was flying high. He found Katharina waiting for him in his home office. She wasn't in the living room or the kitchen. She was in his sanctuary. That was the first warning sign. The second was her expression. It was devoid of all warmth. She was holding a single piece of paper. "Hello, Evander," she said, her voice so cold it could have chipped glass. "Ellie." "What's wrong?" he asked, his smile faltering. She didn't answer. She simply placed the piece of paper on the desk in front of him. It was a printed copy of the most recent Project Renaissance bank statement from UBS. Evander stared at it. The blood drained from his face. His mind went into overdrive, searching for a lie, an explanation, an escape route. But there was none. The numbers, the account name, his shell corporation, it was all there in black and white. Where did you get this?" He stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "Your laptop is surprisingly easy to access when you use the name of your first failed company as a password." "Icarus." "How fitting," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. Did you really think I was that stupid? That I wouldn't notice $20 million missing? That I wouldn't wonder who Isabella Rossi is?" His world tilted on its axis. He was caught, completely and utterly exposed. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The master of the universe was rendered speechless. "You have built a fantasy life on the back of our marriage?" Katharina continued, her voice rising with controlled fury. "A Tuscan villa. An art gallery for your whore. While I am here carrying your son, you are plotting your escape. Katharina, it's not what you think," he began the classic pathetic defense of a guilty man. "Save it," she snapped. "I have everything, Evander. The wire transfers, the architectural plans, the hotel bills. I have it all. My lawyer has it all." The word lawyer hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just a marital spat. This was war. In a state of pure panic, Evander did what all cornered animals do. He lashed out, and then he ran. He tried to gaslight her, to minimize, to blame her for their drifting apart. When that failed, he retreated, his mind reeling. His first instinct was to cut the cord. He had to contain the damage. His immediate reaction was to ghost Isabella. Her increasingly frantic calls went straight to his voicemail. Her texts moving from confusion. "Is everything okay to worry? Evander, please call me to anger. What the hell is going on?" were left unanswered. The steady flow of money into her account ceased. The dream of Gallery Rossi and the Tuscan sun evaporated overnight. Isabella was plunged into a nightmare. She had quit her job. She had signed a lease on a new, expensive apartment based on Evander's promises. She had told her friends and family that she was on the verge of something big. Now she was left with nothing but silence and a dwindling bank account. She was more than a scorned mistress. She was a woman whose future had been leveraged and then abandoned. Desperation began to set in. She went to their hotel in Soho, hoping to find him. The concierge informed her that the permanent booking under his pseudonym had been cancelled. She went to his office building, but security turned her away. She was locked out, erased from his life, as easily as deleting a file. For a week, she wallowed in a mix of heartbreak and terror. Then the grief curdled into a hard, cold rage. Evander Cross had not just broken her heart. He had played her for a fool. He had used her, and now he was trying to discard her. But Isabella Rossi was not disposable. She thought about her options. She could leak the story to the press, but that would make her look like a gold digger. She had the Cartier bracelet and the money in her account, but she had no legal claim to his future. But she did have something else. She had evidence, intimate evidence. Text messages filled with his promises, voicemails where he declared his love and detailed their future together, photos from their secret trips. And then she had an idea. An audacious, terrifying, brilliant idea. There was only one other person in the world who hated Evander Cross more than she did, right now, his wife. With trembling hands, Isabella did a search and found the contact number for Katharina Cross's personal foundation. She left a message, her voice low and urgent. "My name is Isabella Rossi. I have information that I believe Mrs. Cross will find extremely valuable regarding her husband, Evander Cross. Tell her it's about Project Renaissance." The message was relayed to Katharina through her assistant. Katharina, sitting in Victoria Hayes's office, listened to the voicemail. Victoria's eyebrows shot up. "Well, well, well," the lawyer said with a grin. "The plot thickens. The mistress wants to talk. This could be very, very interesting. Katharina felt a wave of revulsion. The thought of speaking to this woman, this home-wrecker, was sickening. But Victoria was right. A scorned mistress with evidence could be a powerful, if unconventional, weapon. Set up a meeting. Katharina commanded, her voice firm. A neutral location. Just the two of us. They met 2 days later in a private room at a discreet restaurant in the Carlisle Hotel. Katharina arrived first, composed and regal in a simple black dress. When Isabella walked in, she looked nervous, defiant, but not defeated. The two women, the wife and the mistress, stood face to face for the first time. The air crackled with unspoken animosity. "Thank you for meeting me," Isabella began, her voice shaky. "I'm not here for pleasantries," Katharina cut in her tone, icy. "You have 5 minutes to tell me why I shouldn't have you thrown out." Isabella took a deep breath. "Because I have what you need to burn him to the ground," she said, her voice gaining strength. "You have the financial records. I have the emotional proof. I have recordings of him telling me he loves me, that he was leaving you after the baby was born. I have texts detailing every promise he ever made. He didn't just lie to you, Mrs. Cross. He lied to me too. He sold me a fantasy and then tried to bankrupt me when it became inconvenient. We have a common enemy." Katharina stared at her, her mind racing. The idea was grotesque. To align herself with this woman, it was unthinkable. But the strategic advantage was undeniable. Katharina had the financial case for fraud. Isabella had the narrative, the proof of malicious intent and emotional cruelty that would be devastating in a public divorce. Together, they could utterly dismantle him. "What do you want?" Katharina asked, her voice still cold, but now laced with a flicker of curiosity. "I want what he promised me," Isabella said, her chin high. "Not his love. That was a lie. I want the gallery. I want the seed money he said he'd give me. I want a future, the one he stole from me. You help me get that, and I will give you every piece of ammunition I have. I will be your star witness. I will hand you his reputation on a silver platter." Katharina was silent for a long moment, studying the woman across from her. She saw the desperation, but she also saw a reflection of her own fury. They were two sides of the same counterfeit coin Evander had been spending. In a world where she should have been Isabella's greatest enemy, she had suddenly, shockingly become her only hope. A slow, cold smile spread across Katharina's face. It was a smile that would have terrified Evander Cross. The rules of the game had just been rewritten. This was no longer just a divorce. It was an alliance. An unholy, brilliant, and utterly devastating alliance. "All right, Ms. Rossi," Katharina said, extending a hand across the table. "It seems you and I have a deal." The alliance between Katharina Cross and Isabella Rossi was a weapon of mass destruction aimed directly at the heart of Evander's empire. In Victoria Hayes's gleaming midtown office, the three women formed a tableau of modern revenge. Katharina, poised and glacial. Isabella, a coiled spring of nervous energy and raw fury. And Victoria, the conductor of the orchestra, her eyes alight with the thrill of a complex high-stakes game. "This is unprecedented," Victoria had said, after their first joint meeting, a genuine smile touching her lips. She leaned back in her chair, observing the two women who should have been mortal enemies. He'll never see it coming. He's preparing for a one-front war against a wife he thinks he can emotionally manipulate. We're about to open a second front he doesn't even know exists. Their strategy sessions were a masterclass in controlled demolition. Katharina's team of forensic accountants, guided by the encrypted USB drive and her father's ruthless oversight, laid out Evander's financial sins in stark, undeniable columns of numbers. They traced the flow of money from Lyceum Dynamics through a labyrinth of shell corporations, each transaction a betrayal culminating in the $20 million slush fund named Project Renaissance. Isabella's contribution was the soul of the betrayal. Spread across the vast conference table were transcripts of texts and voicemails. Victoria read them aloud, her voice neutral, which only amplified their devastating impact. "Leaving her is the hardest thing I'll ever do, but you are my future, Bella. The house in Tuscany is just the start. I'm going to give you the world. Once the baby is born, I can finally be free. Just hold on." Katharina listened without flinching, her hands resting on her pregnant belly. Each word was a fresh cut, but her pain had long since hardened into resolve. She looked at Isabella not with sympathy, but with the detached appreciation of a general assessing a powerful piece of artillery. Isabella, in turn, avoided Katharina's gaze, focusing on the documents. Recounting the affair in her sworn affidavit had been humiliating, but seeing the cold proof of how she was just one part of a larger financial scheme fueled her anger, burning away the shame. She was not just a heartbroken lover. She was a defrauded investor in a fantasy startup. Meanwhile, Evander was operating in a different reality. He had hired a team of legal pit bulls from Skadden Arp's lawyers who specialized in crushing corporate rivals, not navigating the delicate nuances of marital dissolution. In his mind, this was just another negotiation, another deal to be won. "She's emotional," he told his lead attorney, a man named Marcus Thorne. "She's pregnant. She'll make a lot of noise, but in the end, she's not a fighter. We offer her a generous settlement, something that looks good on paper. 20, maybe 30 million, a clean break. She'll take it." Marcus, a shrewder man than Evander gave him credit for, had his doubts. "The allegation of a hidden offshore account is serious, Evander. If she has proof—" "She has nothing," Evander snapped, waving a dismissive hand. "Paranoia. She found a credit card bill for a hotel, that's all. There is no proof. He truly believed it. His arrogance was a shield blinding him to the fatal flaw in his fortress. He had underestimated his wife. He authorized the lowball offer, confident it would be the opening salvo in a short, victorious campaign. He imagined Katharina, overwhelmed and advised by some second-rate family lawyer, would eventually capitulate. He had no idea that he wasn't just facing Katharina. He was facing a triumvirate of fury brains and righteous vengeance. The first shot was fired not with a return phone call, but with a thermonuclear explosion on page 6 of the New York Post. Victoria Hayes had timed the leak perfectly, ensuring the divorce petition, with all its explosive appendices, landed in the hands of the city's most notorious gossip columnist. The headline was a masterpiece of tabloid brutality: "Tech mogul Evander Cross's secret life. Pregnant wife, hidden millions. And the mistress, he promised a Tuscan villa." The story detonated across New York. It was a sensation devoured at breakfast tables from Park Avenue to Brooklyn. Every sordid detail was laid bare: the secret UBS account, Project Renaissance, or the architectural plans for the love nest in Tuscany, and the name Isabella Rossi, now irrevocably linked to his. The narrative was clear and damning. This wasn't a simple case of a straying husband. This was the story of a cold, calculating plot by a billionaire to systematically defraud and abandon his pregnant wife. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. By the time Evander's phone started ringing off the hook, Lyceum Dynamics' stock was in freefall. The board, a group of men who valued reputation and stability above all else, convened an emergency meeting. Their company's brand was built on security and trust. Their CEO was now the national poster child for deceit and betrayal. The morality clause in Evander's employment contract, once a forgotten piece of boilerplate, was invoked. By noon, he was forced to take an immediate and indefinite leave of absence. The empire he had bled for the company, that was the very core of his identity, had been ripped from his grasp in a matter of hours. Evander was left in the ruins, shell-shocked. He stared at the newspaper, his hands shaking the name Isabella Rossi, seeming to burn a hole through the page. It was her involvement that he couldn't process. That she would turn on him, that she would align herself with Katharina. It was a betrayal so profound, so outside his calculations, that it broke something in him. It was a variable his supreme arrogance had never even considered. His world shrank overnight. The fawning calls from business partners stopped. Friends suddenly became unavailable for lunch. He was a pariah, a walking scandal. The legal battle he had prepared for a measured negotiation was over before it began. It was now a frantic damage control operation. His lawyers, faced with insurmountable and now very public evidence, advised him there was only one path: unconditional surrender. The final meeting took place in the sterile, airless conference room of Victoria Hayes's firm. The silence was heavy, broken only by the rustling of papers. Evander looked like a ghost of the man he'd once been. His bespoke suit hung on him, his confident swagger replaced by a hollowed-out exhaustion. Across the table, Katharina sat like an avenging angel. Her pregnancy now pronounced her expression as serene and implacable as a marble statue. She was flanked by Victoria and her father Arthur, who looked at Evander with undisguised contempt. Victoria began, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion, as she laid out the terms of the settlement. Each one was a hammer blow. First division of assets. Mrs. Cross will receive 60% of the total combined marital estate. Evander flinched. 60%. It was punitive. This includes a majority stake of your shares in Lyceum Dynamics. Victoria continued effectively transferring controlling interest to Mrs. Cross. His breath caught. His company. She was taking his company. He looked at Katharina, who met his gaze without blinking. The Manhattan penthouse and all its contents will be retained by Mrs. Cross. A trust fund in the amount of $100 million will be established for your son Arthur, ensuring he is independently secure for the rest of his life. He had lost his home. He had lost his legacy. His son would be a stranger to him, raised on his money, but under another's name. Then came the final term, the one that showcased the breathtaking depth of Katharina's strategic genius. Finally, Victoria said, sliding a separate document across the table, "You will wire the sum of $5 million to a holding corporation." She paused for effect. "The name of that corporation is Gallery Rossi, LLC." Evander stared at the document as if it were a venomous snake. It was the checkmate. He was being forced to personally fund the future of the woman he had tried to erase, a future brokered by the wife he had betrayed. It was Isabella's severance, her hush money, and the cruel, poetic fulfillment of his own broken promise. He had no choice. His lawyers gave him a subtle, defeated nod. With a trembling hand, Evander picked up the pen. As it scratched across the signature line, signing away his fortune, his company, and his pride, he looked up at Katharina one last time, searching her face for any flicker of the woman he had married, of the love they had shared. He found none. He saw only a stranger, a cold-eyed victor, who had beaten him at his own game. A month later, Katharina gave birth to a healthy baby boy, Arthur. She gracefully assumed her role on the board of Lyceum, not as a grieving widow, but as a shrewd and powerful force, her quiet intelligence steering the company out of the scandal. She sold the penthouse, wiping away the last vestiges of her old life, and moved with her son into a beautiful sunlit townhouse, creating a new world, quieter, but infinitely more secure. She had lost a husband, but had claimed an empire. Isabella Rossi vanished from the headlines as quickly as she had appeared. The $5 million was quietly transferred. Months later, a chic minimalist art gallery opened its doors in Soho. Its name was simply Rossi. Isabella, now its sole proprietor, became a respected if enigmatic figure in the art world. She had her dream, not through the love of a powerful man, but through a cold, hard bargain. She had learned a brutal lesson. Never trust a promise, only a contract. And Evander Cross. He was a man adrift in a sea of his own making. He remained wealthy, but he was diminished. A cautionary tale whispered at galas and in boardrooms. He wandered the empty rooms of a new, soulless apartment, haunted by the ghost of the perfect life he had so carelessly set on fire. He had wanted two worlds, and in his boundless greed, he had lost them both, leaving him trapped forever in the ruins. And there you have it. A story of how a man at the pinnacle of success risked it all for a fantasy only to be brought down by an alliance he never could have imagined. Evander Cross thought he could control every outcome, but he underestimated the fury of a betrayed wife and the desperation of a scorned mistress. It's a powerful reminder that secrets have a price, and sometimes that price is everything. What did you think of Katharina's final move? Was it justice or cold-blooded revenge? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.
A man at the pinnacle of wealth and power, a wife at home, carrying his child, and a glamorous mistress stealing the spotlight. But what happens when greed and betrayal collide at the very moment new life is meant to be celebrated? In a shocking twist that rocked high society circles, billionaire mogul Victor Harrington chose to whisk his mistress away on a secret baby moon, leaving his pregnant wife, Eleanor, behind. Little did he know that one impulsive decision would unravel a carefully built empire overnight. Brace yourself for a tale of lavish lifestyles, boardroom betrayals, and one pregnant woman's brilliant revenge. Victor Harrington was the kind of man who seemed destined for opulence from birth. Born into a wealthy family in Greenwich, Connecticut, he'd possessed an effortless charm and ambition that made him a force to be reckoned with even before he earned his MBA from Harvard Business School. People close to him said he was unstoppable, a man with the cunning of a Wall Street wolf and the charm of a Hollywood star. He had cut deals in the early days. Alongside mentors who boasted legendary names, he once studied an investment portfolio under Warren Buffett's guidance at a Berkshire Hathaway internship, followed by an immersive executive program at Tesla University, where he brushed shoulders with Elon Musk. By the time he was 30, he had built Harrington Industries into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. By the time he was 40, he was on the prestigious Forbes billionaires list. Eleanor Davenport, soon to be Eleanor Harrington, first met Victor at a charity gala in Manhattan. Although her family was old money, they didn't flaunt it as visibly as the nouveau riche. She was a rising star in the philanthropic world, championing social justice causes, and her quiet grace drew Victor toward her like a magnet. The marriage was a match that made the front page of society magazines, promising to unite two powerful families in a union of wealth, influence, and mutual respect. For a long while, their life was the epitome of gilded harmony. They graced galas, inaugurated libraries, shook hands with political leaders, and jetted off to the French Riviera for impromptu vacations. Their future shone as bright as the diamond on Eleanor's left hand. But even the sturdiest empires can hide cracks. Unbeknownst to Eleanor, cracks were forming behind the scenes at Harrington Industries. Victor had an undeniable appetite for success, for excitement, and for women. When he met Bianca Suarez at a high-level conference in Dubai, it started as an innocent flirtation. She was an emerging media consultant, with her own brand of allure, mysterious, witty, and dangerously ambitious. If anyone had told Victor he was playing with fire, he would have laughed it off. After all, he was Victor Harrington, untouchable, unstoppable. But sometimes the most disastrous events start with just a spark. Over months, lunches turned into dinners, and dinners turned into clandestine weekends in exclusive resorts. Bianca introduced him to the kind of escapades he'd never even allowed himself to dream about before. While Eleanor was 3 months pregnant, carefully nurturing the next heir to the Harrington fortune, Victor found himself dancing intimately with his mistress under the shimmering skyline of Dubai, uncertain whether the rapid beating of his heart was excitement or guilt. Bianca didn't want to be a mere fling. She was calculated. She saw in Victor a chance to climb the social and financial ladder faster than any route she had previously considered. And so she stoked his ego, commiserated with his frustrations, and dangled the promise of secret passions whenever he seemed restless. If it was money and influence she wanted, Victor was more than willing to shower her with lavish gifts. To him, money was just a resource expendable and easily replenished. At first, he believed he could keep this double life separate from the pristine marriage he had built with Eleanor. His logic was twisted, but clear to him. His wife was his anchor, his old money confidant, who maintained his impeccable social standing. The mistress was a wild indulgence. He could afford a carefully contained adventure. He had no intention of hurting Eleanor, or so he told himself. Unfortunately for Victor, the threads keeping this secret under wraps were about to fray. A confidential tip circulated in the narrow corridors of Manhattan's wealthiest cliques. A society blogger posted an unconfirmed rumor about Victor seen dining with a mysterious brunette at a private suite in the Four Seasons Hotel. Most shrugged it off as an everyday hazard of being rich and famous. False rumors swirl constantly around the extremely wealthy. But there was more to this rumor than idle chatter. For the moment, Victor thought he had it all under control. He was a master juggler, wasn't he? Everything would remain neatly balanced, until it all came crashing down. As Eleanor's belly swelled with the promise of motherhood, her doctors advised a tranquil holiday to alleviate stress and welcome a sense of peace before the baby arrived. Friends whispered about the latest trend, a baby moon, a final romantic getaway for expecting couples. Eleanor secretly hoped Victor would take her somewhere calm, maybe a resort in the Maldives or a private villa in the Amalfi Coast. The dream of strolling white sandy beaches, holding Victor's hand, and relishing in the final moments of pregnancy, bliss danced in her mind. Victor, however, had a different plan entirely, a plan that was breathtakingly audacious and heartless. He decided to treat Bianca to a baby moon instead, using the ruse of an urgent business summit in Bali. For Victor, it was the ultimate indulgence, combine business with pleasure, while his wife rested at home, unaware that her husband was on the other side of the world, sipping cocktails by a turquoise infinity pool with another woman. He arranged it meticulously. He told Eleanor he was swamped with a high-stakes negotiation in Southeast Asia. Supposedly, several billionaire investors, including a silent partner, rumored to be connected with Bernard Arnault's luxury empire, had demanded an in-person meeting to finalize a partnership. The clock was ticking, he claimed. If he didn't fly out immediately, Harrington Industries risked missing a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. Concerned and weary, Eleanor kissed him goodbye, placing her hand gently over her baby bump and whispering, "Please come home safe." Half a globe away, Victor's private jet landed under the scorching Balinese sun. Bianca, exuding confidence in a linen sundress and designer sunglasses, looked every bit the radiant vacationer. It was a world apart from Eleanor's subdued maternity style back in New York. They settled into an exclusive luxury resort, one that boasted private villas ensconced amid lush tropical forests and infinity pools that seemed to spill into the horizon. To Victor, the staff was discreet, the views unparalleled, and the exclusivity absolute, the perfect setting for a forbidden escapade. But even in paradise, there were signs that things could go wrong. Rumors had circulated that a well-known Hollywood actress was staying at the resort. The paparazzi lurking outside with long-lens cameras were determined to snag any sensational shot. Victor, in his arrogance, paid them no mind. He was too busy enjoying lavish seafood dinners, couples spa treatments, and romantic beachside strolls with Bianca. He reasoned that even if a photograph leaked, he had enough influence to squash it. Money talks, and hush money screams, as he liked to say. What he didn't anticipate was that a local journalist working part-time as a bartender recognized him immediately. The journalist, named Ayu Priyanka, was a savvy freelance reporter. She knew the difference between professional business summit behavior and lovers on a secret holiday. Intrigued, she discreetly snapped a few photographs with her phone, capturing Victor and Bianca laughing over a candle-lit dinner. At first, Ayu weighed the potential consequences. Could these pictures be valuable enough to lead to a groundbreaking story in an international tabloid? Possibly. But first, she needed more solid proof, a narrative that went beyond just two people enjoying a vacation. While Victor reveled in the illusions of a perfect getaway, Eleanor was left to manage her pregnancy in New York, dealing with morning sickness doctor's appointments, and the creeping suspicion that her husband's voice over the phone sounded distant, disconnected. She found herself lying awake at night, staring at the vaulted ceiling of their penthouse, feeling a cold emptiness in their once warm bed. Something was terribly off, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. Her mother, Cecilia Davenport, urged her to rest and trust in Victor's dedication to their growing family. After all, he was a busy billionaire. He had always been a bit distant when major deals were on the line. The seeds of betrayal had been planted. If Victor had known the destructive potential of this trip, he might have turned the jet around before it even left the tarmac in New York. But he was blinded by Bianca's enchantments and his own audacity. Each day in Bali heightened his recklessness. He even posted a cryptic Instagram photo of palm trees and a hidden silhouette, an attempt at being clever. Inadvertently, that single post gave watchers enough clues to confirm his exact location. The stage was set for a grand reveal. The baby moon that should have belonged to Eleanor was turning into a ticking time bomb. Sooner or later, a photo or rumor would slip through the cracks, and the moment it did, it would detonate not just Victor's marriage, but potentially the entire foundation of Harrington Industries. In the days following Victor's departure, Eleanor tried to distract herself with philanthropic work. She immersed herself in a high-profile hospital fundraiser hosted at the New York Public Library, the same halls once graced by the likes of Michael Bloomberg and philanthropic luminaries from across the nation. Yet even as she stood at the podium, acknowledging donations and delivering heartfelt speeches, an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. It was during one of these fundraisers that Eleanor bumped into her old friend, Serena Marshall, a well-connected socialite and gossip connoisseur. They embraced warmly, then retreated to a corner table where Serena's voice dropped to a whisper. "Ellie, dear, have you heard anything odd about Victor lately?" Eleanor bristled at the tone, feeling a pang of unease. She mustered a soft laugh, trying to brush off any concerns. "Funny you should ask," Eleanor replied. "He's in Bali, urgent business. Hasn't been easy on me, but you know how these deals are." Serena looked at her sympathetically, but her eyes flashed with alarm. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice further. "I heard something from a contact in Singapore. Someone said they saw Victor with a woman named Bianca Suarez, apparently a rising star in media consulting. And they weren't exactly at a boardroom table." Eleanor's heart lurched. She struggled to maintain her composure, her mind racing with possibilities. Could this be a misunderstanding? A smear attempt by a competitor? She had known Victor for years, had believed in his loyalty, though she was aware of his love for excitement. She forced a polite smile, dismissing the rumors. "I'm sure it's some confusion. You know how gossip can get twisted." Serena nodded, but the shadow in her eyes spoke volumes. "Just keep your eyes open, Ellie. If you need help, you know where to find me." That night, alone in her penthouse, Eleanor found her thoughts spiraling. She recalled the nights Victor had come home, late, the hush-hush phone calls, the vague business dinners. She scrolled through social media, scanning for clues, anything to confirm or debunk the rumors. Eventually, she stumbled upon Victor's cryptic Instagram post, palm trees in the background, a silhouette that looked suspiciously feminine. A flood of emotions overtook her. She ran to the bathroom, tears mixing with waves of nausea from her pregnancy. The baby felt her turmoil kicking inside her womb, a reminder of why she had to maintain her composure. Meanwhile, half a world away, Victor's lavish romance continued unabated. He lounged with Bianca in a cabana overlooking the ocean. They talked about launching new philanthropic initiatives, ironically enough, under Bianca's name, funded by Victor's bottomless resources. Bianca was adept at shaping narratives guiding Victor's public image. "Picture this," she said, leaning forward with sparkling eyes. "We frame you as a forward-thinking businessman who invests in youth-oriented media projects across Asia. You'll expand your market reach and look good doing it. I can even help you with the contacts and PR." Victor, enthralled, listened intently. He considered Bianca not just a lover, but a strategic mind who understood branding in a way that could amplify Harrington Industries' global presence. In his mind, he was weaving a dream, a future where he could maintain a public marriage with Eleanor, keep control of his empire, and quietly enjoy a partnership with Bianca that would catapult them both to unprecedented heights. But the cracks in that dream were starting to show. On the third day of their business trip, Victor received a text from one of his board members, Jackson Wolfe, an old friend who had initially introduced him to some of his earliest investors. The text was direct: "Call me. Urgent. Concern about rumors." Victor paled as he read the message. Could it be? But he shrugged it off. Board members worry about everything from stock fluctuation to media gossip. Still, the knot in his stomach tightened. Jackson, however, knew something that Victor didn't. News was spreading in hush-hush financial circles that the Harrington brand was vulnerable. Pioneering investors disliked uncertainty. If the rumors of Victor's scandal went public, it could undermine negotiations, spook shareholders, and create chaos. Handle it before it blows up, Jackson's text concluded. Yet even that warning didn't shake Victor enough to abandon his tryst. He rationalized that he would handle the fallout once he returned to New York. He was Victor Harrington, after all, a man who had charmed senators out, negotiated cunning tycoons, and turned entire markets on their heads with a single announcement. A rumor or two wouldn't bring him down. Across the ocean, Eleanor was wrestling with growing doubts. She paced the penthouse, replaying every suspicious detail of the past months. Could Victor really be that brazen to take another woman on the very trip meant for them? She didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was mounting. She decided to call an old college acquaintance, Damien Cho, a private investigator who specialized in high-profile cases. "Damien," she began, her voice trembling, I need you to look into something." Discreetly. Eleanor's resolution to seek the truth was the first step toward unraveling Victor's carefully woven tapestry of lies. But it wouldn't stop there. Even she didn't realize yet that once she discovered what was truly happening, her response would be nothing short of a coup, one that would leave Victor's empire trembling at her feet. Damien Cho worked fast. He was an expert in navigating the hidden underbelly of high society scandals. Having once been hired to investigate the suspicious affairs of an actual European prince, this job was par for the course, but it carried a personal element. He knew Eleanor from her days volunteering at a local community center. He respected her warmth, her dedication. And so, when Eleanor asked for his help, he pledged to handle the matter personally. He first followed the breadcrumbs online, examining social media check-ins, cross-referencing flight logs from Teterboro Airport, where Victor often chartered private jets, combing through paparazzi shots of Indonesian resorts. It didn't take long to connect the dots. Damien discreetly messaged contacts in Bali, among them a local stringer for an American tabloid who confirmed that a wealthy American named Victor Harrington had been spotted with a woman who was decidedly not pregnant. As the puzzle pieces fell into place, Damien's chest tightened with an uneasy sense of foreboding. This wasn't just a case of a random affair. The stakes were colossal. The Harrington name carried weight in corporate boardrooms across the globe, and any scandal could rock markets and ripple through philanthropic circles. The next step was deciding how to deliver the news to Eleanor without breaking her heart entirely. Meanwhile, Eleanor found daily life increasingly difficult. She attended obstetric appointments alone, feigning a smile when the doctor asked about Victor's whereabouts. Her mother noticed the change in her demeanor. "Ellie, darling, you look so tired. Is everything all right?" Eleanor shook her head, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "I just need some rest, Mum. I'll be okay." But the moment Cecilia left, Eleanor gave in to sobs, tears that combined heartbreak with a fierce determination. She had a baby to protect, and she would not allow uncertainty to linger. When Damien finally presented his findings, documented photos, flight logs, even a snippet of a conversation recorded by a local resort worker, Eleanor felt both devastation and a strange, cold clarity. She stared at the evidence in stony silence. The man she loved, the father of her unborn child, had chosen to spend precious days in paradise with another woman, parading their affair so openly that it had already begun to leak in social circles. But heartbreak wasn't the only emotion coursing through Eleanor. A sense of betrayal so profound that it threatened to consume her was tempered by the resilience her family had instilled in her. The Davenport lineage was filled with strong, sharp-witted individuals, some who had weathered financial crises, others who had surmounted personal tragedies. Eleanor carried that legacy in her veins. If Victor wanted to toy with her trust, she would answer in a way that made him regret underestimating her. She quietly called her personal attorney, Simone Gold, a formidable woman with an impeccable track record in corporate law. Simone Eleanor said softly, "I need to talk about my shares in Harrington Industries and what I might do with them if circumstances change." That phone call set off a chain of events that would reshape the corporate landscape of Harrington Industries. In an ironclad prenuptial agreement, a document Victor insisted on, there was a clause that ironically granted Eleanor a significant stake in the company if Victor ever breached certain moral turpitude conditions. At the time, neither had expected it to be relevant. After all, it was standard protective language in high society marriages to discourage reckless behavior. Now that clause became Eleanor's key to a possible coup. Late one evening, Eleanor sat with Simone in a private library. The scene was fit for a secret conspiracy. Thick velvet drapes, mahogany tables, the faint glow of a Tiffany lamp, illuminating piles of legal documents. "We have everything we need if you choose to proceed," Simone stated calmly. "You can call for a vote of no confidence, leveraging your shares, and then move to replace Victor as CEO if you prove a serious breach of conduct that jeopardizes the company." Eleanor closed her eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. He's not just a cheating husband. He's risking the company's reputation. Investors talk. Stocks drop at the mere hint of scandal. The board might push him out to save their own skins. "I just never thought I'd be the one orchestrating this." Simone placed a reassuring hand on Eleanor's. "From my experience, betrayal often forces us into decisions we never thought we'd make. But the best decisions are those made from strength, not spite." Meanwhile, across the world, Victor was blissfully unaware of the legal storm brewing in New York. His only concern was how to spin the rumors swirling around the resort. Bianca, too, was confident. Over dinner one night, she reassured him. "We can craft a PR statement that says you were networking with me for a series of upcoming deals in Southeast Asia. Bring up philanthropic collaborations in local communities, nobody will suspect a thing." Victor nodded in agreement, grateful for her cunning. It never crossed his mind that back home a pregnant Eleanor was on the brink of executing a swift and devastating plan. Simone's phone calls to board members had already begun under the guise of friendly check-ins. She was gathering allies, stoking concerns about Victor's reliability. The board, always protective of its bottom line, listened closely. After all, a scandal at the top could mean bad press, falling stock, or worse. Piece by piece, Eleanor's revolt was forming. She was no longer the timid, heartbroken wife. She was a future mother who refused to let her child inherit the aftermath of a father's betrayal. If Victor wasn't going to be a responsible partner, she would ensure he couldn't take the company down with him. In less than a week, the stage would be set for an explosive board meeting, one that would pit Eleanor's quiet determination against Victor's flamboyant arrogance. Victor returned to New York in a flurry of self-assured triumph, convinced that he had contained any rumors about his secret affair with Bianca. He strolled into his penthouse, expecting to find Eleanor in a subdued but loving mood. Instead, the apartment was cool-hushed. Even the staff seemed unusually tense. Eleanor was sitting in the living room, sipping tea, her eyes distant. The subtle tension in the air pricked at Victor's confidence, but he masked it with a charming grin. "Darling, I'm home," he announced, setting down his luggage. He reached out to kiss her cheek, but she recoiled, her expression revealing the silent storm within. "Where were you, really?" she asked softly, the tremble in her voice betraying her hurt. For a moment, Victor froze, his mind whirling with excuses. "I told you," he began, forcing composure, "negotiations in Bali. It was stressful, but stressful. Eleanor interrupted. Her voice rose slightly. Look at me, Victor. She stood, revealing her swollen belly. I'm the one who's pregnant with your child alone while you were off entertaining your mistress. Her words reverberated in the elegant living room, echoing amid the hush of the staff. Victor's eyes flickered with panic. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Eleanor, we shouldn't do this in front of... She cut him off again, the tears in her eyes reflecting both pain and fury. We shouldn't do this at all, but you left me no choice. With trembling hands, she gathered her coat and purse. I'll be at my mother's. My attorney will be in touch. Victor felt the world tilt beneath him. Eleanor, wait. We can talk this through. You know I know everything, she hissed, her voice cold as steel. With that, she turned on her heel and walked out, accompanied by 2 discreet bodyguards her mother had insisted she employ. The slamming door reverberated, leaving Victor in a stunned silence that belied the magnitude of the unfolding crisis. The next few days passed in a blur of chaos for Victor. He frantically texted and called Eleanor, but her responses were minimal formal. She refused to meet alone. Then came the calls from the Harrington Industries board members. A special board meeting had been scheduled for the following week. The stated reason, urgent discussions regarding leadership and corporate strategy. The tone of the calls made Victor's stomach drop. There was no cordial small talk, no easy banter. These were men and women who smelled blood in the water. Desperate Victor reached out to Bianca for comfort. But even she sensed the shifting currents. We need a plan, she told him, her face pale with concern, during a hushed dinner in a secluded Michelin star restaurant. You have to get ahead of this. Frame your trip as purely business. Remind them how indispensable you are. Show them your next big project is about to roll out. She offered him PR angles, preparing to rally her media contacts. Yet even Bianca's cunning felt insufficient against the tidal wave Eleanor had set in motion. Behind closed doors, Simone Gold was meeting with Harrington board members, presenting them evidence of Victor's risky behavior and how it jeopardized the company's reputation and future prospects. She skillfully outlined the moral turpitude clause and how it could be invoked to remove him. Meanwhile, Eleanor, hidden away at her mother's estate, tried to steady her emotions and maintain her health for the baby. She found solace in daily visits to her favorite greenhouse on the property, letting the scent of fresh blooms and the vibrancy of life remind her why she was fighting this battle so fiercely. Perhaps the most decisive ally Eleanor gained was Jackson Wolfe, the board member who'd been Victor's close friend. As the scandal threatened to burst into public view, Jackson too found himself cornered by anxious stakeholders and even the press. He'd always admired Victor's brilliance, but he couldn't deny the volatility that was now overshadowing the CEO's leadership. When Eleanor approached him with a personal appeal, asking him to place the company's welfare first, Jackson felt the weight of responsibility. After all, an empire like Harrington Industries didn't revolve around just one man. It had thousands of employees, global partners, and philanthropic obligations. A meltdown at the top could hurt them all. The tension escalated as tabloids began printing speculative articles about Victor's affair. Photos from Bali surfaced online, showing a man who looked suspiciously like Victor Harrington in an intimate embrace with a mystery woman. An onlooker claimed they overheard staff whispering Bianca's name. While some media outlets remained cautious, calling the pictures inconclusive, the digital sphere teemed with rumors. Social media users shared side-by-side comparisons of the man in Bali with official photos of Victor. The avalanche had begun. In an emergency PR move, Victor released a statement through Harrington Industries claiming he had been inspecting potential sites for philanthropic work and that Ms. Bianca Suarez was a consultant assisting in negotiations with local community leaders. The statement was riddled with corporate jargon, and critics pounced on it as an evasive half-truth. The board meeting date approached ominously. Investors whispered about the potential for a shift in leadership. Analysts on financial channels debated the seriousness of the scandal's impact. Share prices wavered slightly, but enough to create nervous chatter. All the while, Victor felt increasingly trapped, his once indomitable confidence shaken to the core. Somewhere behind the scenes, Eleanor steeled herself. She placed a hand on her baby bump, remembering why she needed to see this through. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about securing a future for her child, free from the looming shadow of a father who believed he could treat people as pawns in his personal game. She wanted to protect the legacy that her baby would one day inherit, ensuring it wasn't poisoned by Victor's self-serving choices. When the morning of the board meeting finally arrived, Manhattan buzzed with anticipation. Black SUVs lined up outside Harrington Tower. News vans prowled the streets, hoping for a glimpse of either Victor or Eleanor. Inside the building's executive conference room, the fate of one of the city's most powerful men hung in the balance. And unbeknownst to Victor, Eleanor had spent countless hours meticulously preparing for this moment. On an unseasonably cold spring morning, the towering glass facade of Harrington Tower reflected a bleak, steel-gray sky. Inside the executive conference room on the 59th floor, a series of tense discussions filled the air. Board members took their seats around a polished mahogany table. At the head sat an imposing leather chair reserved for the CEO, a seat that Victor Harrington assumed was unequivocally his. But as the clock neared 9 a.m., the tension in the room crackled with electric intensity. Victor entered shoulders-squared hair, meticulously styled, wearing a custom-tailored suit. He exuded the aura of a man used to control, but a subtle flicker in his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Next to him walked Bianca, meticulously groomed in a business outfit, ready to spin narratives. Her presence alone raised eyebrows. Traditionally, only top executives or board-invited advisors attended these pivotal meetings. Bianca, however, was neither. Whispers erupted as board members exchanged curious looks. At precisely 9 a.m., the doors swung open again. Eleanor stepped inside, supported by her attorney, Simone Gold. Wearing a subdued black dress that discreetly draped her pregnant figure, she moved with quiet, composed determination. A hush fell over the room. Heads turned, and even Victor's practiced poise faltered for an instant. This was the first time he'd seen his wife since she had walked out of the penthouse. She acknowledged the board members with a polite nod, her gaze not lingering too long on Victor. No one missed the significance of her presence, especially because she was still a major shareholder with seats on the board that her Davenport family connections had secured. Simone took a seat beside Eleanor, placing a leather briefcase on the table, the metal clasps glinting under fluorescent lights. The board chair, an elderly statesman named Arthur Norwood, cleared his throat. "Thank you all for attending this extraordinary session. We have urgent matters to discuss regarding Harrington Industries' leadership vision and recent developments in the public sphere." His gaze darted from Victor to Eleanor and back again. "This is a confidential meeting, so I expect the utmost discretion." Victor tried to seize the initiative. Standing, he projected his confident, booming voice. "Before we begin, let me address the swirling rumors. There have been malicious reports in the press about my personal life. I want to assure everyone here that these allegations are blown out of proportion. My trip to Bali was primarily for philanthropic site inspections and negotiations with prospective investors. He gestured toward Bianca. Ms. Suarez has been an instrumental media consultant, helping me navigate international expansions and philanthropic strategies. Bianca stepped forward, her tone crisp and professional. I understand the concerns, but I assure you, my partnership with Mr. Harrington is strictly business. We've been discussing a large-scale youth media initiative. Eleanor, calm, yet resolute, interrupted. That's enough. She rose slowly, one hand resting protectively on her belly. Her voice was steady, resonant with an inner strength. We're all aware of the photographic evidence. We know the media stories aren't mere fabrications, but the real issue here isn't just a personal indiscretion. It's the risk posed to this company, our company, by this scandal. She glanced around the table, meeting each board member's gaze. I have proof of how negotiations with certain Asian partners have been compromised by the negative press. Investor confidence is wavering. And this is on top of the moral turpitude clause in Victor's contract. A stunned silence followed. Moral turpitude clauses were rarely mentioned in corporate contexts, but in high-profile marriages that intersected with business holdings, they were sometimes used to protect the company from the detrimental actions of a key figure. Victor's face paled momentarily. He cast a sharp look at Simone, recalling the prenuptial agreement's fine print that he once dismissed as boilerplate. She returned his stare with icy composure. Arthur Norwood cleared his throat again. Mrs. Harrington, can you elaborate on the severity of these repercussions? Simone clicked open her briefcase and pulled out neatly organized documents. Board members here, you'll find data illustrating recent dips in stock value following the barley scandal leaks. This is paired with the explicit language in the moral turpitude clause that Mr. Harrington personally signed. If certain actions, infidelity-damaging public scandals, put the company at risk, shareholders have the right to demand a revaluation of leadership. Victor jumped to his feet, voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. This is outrageous. You're using our personal issues to stage a corporate coup. You can't do this. Jackson Wolfe spoke up, surprising Victor with the quiet resolve in his voice. Victor, your name may be on the building, but you're not the sole owner. We all have to safeguard Harrington Industries. The press is already circling. If we lose key investors because of your personal mistakes, thousands of jobs could be at risk, not to mention our philanthropic commitments. He paused, avoiding Victor's gaze. I'm sorry, old friend, but business is business. The tension reached a fever pitch as a motion was placed on the table. Eleanor, supported by her block of shares and quietly backed by the Davenport family's significant influence, made a formal request for a vote of no confidence in Victor Harrington as CEO. Typically, such measures took weeks to arrange. But the moral turpitude clause, combined with the urgent crisis, allowed an immediate consideration. It was unprecedented, but legal. Victor and Bianca watched in mounting horror as the votes were cast. Old alliances turned shaky. Some board members, who once owed their positions to Victor, now weighed their own survival. The result wasn't even close. A majority sided with Eleanor and Simone's proposal. The motion carried, effectively ousting Victor from the CEO position pending further negotiations regarding his stake and role in the company. Eleanor looked across the table, her eyes moist with a blend of triumph and heartbreak. Victor, I never wanted it to come to this, she said quietly, but you forced my hand. Stunned into silence, Victor sank into his chair. Bianca tried to speak, to offer a rebuttal or spin, but her words faltered in the face of the board's overwhelming consensus. The meeting concluded with a swirl of legal procedures. A caretaker CEO would be appointed, with an emergency leadership council to manage day-to-day operations, while a permanent replacement was sought. For all intents and purposes, Victor's reign was over. As people gathered their folders and prepared to leave, an ominous hush filled the room. The downfall of a once mighty empire head had played out in a mere hour. Eleanor, gathering her strength, exited without another word, Simone at her side. In the hallway, the press buzzed, cameras flashing. But Eleanor walked past them, a silent force of composure, stepping into a waiting car that whisked her away. Inside that car, she finally allowed herself to exhale. She gently placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby's light kick. A swirl of conflicting emotions flooded her: sorrow, relief, fury, and the faint hope that maybe now the child she carried could one day grow into a legacy untainted by reckless betrayal. Victor had taken a mistress on a baby moon that should have been theirs, but in that betrayal, he had also handed Eleanor the keys to the kingdom. The world of high finance reacted swiftly to the seismic shift at Harrington Industries. Within hours, the news had spread from private trading floors in Hong Kong to business lunches in London. Major outlets like the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times dedicated front-page headlines to Victor Harrington's sudden ouster, speculating on the behind-the-scenes drama that led to it. Business analysts on CNBC questioned whether Harrington Industries could maintain its momentum without the larger-than-life charisma of its founder. But in hushed corners of society events and exclusive clubs, the whispers focused on the scandal's personal dimension. Everyone knew that Victor had been unseated, not just by the board, but by the very wife he betrayed while she was pregnant with his child. The story was salacious enough to feed tabloids for weeks, but it also showcased Eleanor's business acumen and unyielding resolve. Where once people saw her as simply Victor's gracious spouse, they now recognized a formidable woman who had deftly used a moral turpitude clause to protect herself and the company. Victor retreated to a penthouse suite at the Carlisle Hotel, a discreet refuge for the city's affluent seeking privacy amid turmoil. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from attorneys, PR managers, and concerned allies. But not all calls were sympathetic. Some were angry investors demanding explanations, and others were from tabloids offering extravagant sums for exclusive interviews. Victor ignored most of them, drowning his sorrows in half-empty whiskey glasses. Bianca hovered around him, attempting to console him. Yet her once firm confidence now wavered as she faced the repercussions of being publicly named as the Mistress. Gossip columns buzzed with her name, some labeling her a gold digger who had orchestrated the entire fiasco to boost her media profile. Even legitimate media platforms questioned her credentials, doubting her role as a bona fide consultant. The brand she'd painstakingly built threatened to crumble, and the high-profile connections she once courted grew wary of associating with scandal. She tried to assure Victor that they still had each other, and that it was only a matter of time before they bounced back. But in the pit of his despair, her words rang hollow. Meanwhile, behind the imposing walls of the Davenport estate, Eleanor found herself grappling with mixed emotions. She had succeeded in removing Victor from the company leadership, but the personal cost weighed heavily on her. She was married to a man whose betrayal had shattered her trust. For nights on end, she lay awake, feeling the baby's gentle movements and wondering what kind of future they would have. She consulted with Simone about legal separation, maybe even divorce, but each time she hesitated, mindful of the unborn child who would inevitably link her life to Victor's in some way. While Eleanor wrestled with internal conflicts, corporate maneuvers continued at Harrington Industries. The newly appointed caretaker CEO, Lawrence Porter, a veteran executive from within the company, diligently tried to stabilize investor sentiment. He reached out to longtime partners, reminding them of the company's resilient fundamentals and diversified portfolio. But the stock still dipped further, reflecting the market's anxiety. Even seasoned analysts couldn't discount the intangible influence Victor once held. Lawrence, however, had Eleanor's backing, and Jackson Wolfe's strategic insight. Their combined efforts formed a temporary shield against a total collapse in confidence. In an attempt to turn the tide, Simone advised Eleanor to take a more visible role. "You don't have to be CEO, but your presence will reassure investors," she said gently. "Host a small event. Show your commitment to the company. Let them see that the Harrington brand is intact, anchored by someone with integrity." Eleanor was reluctant, but she recognized the necessity. Against her natural inclination for privacy, she agreed to hold a press conference to address the company's future. Titled "A New Horizon for Harrington Industries," it was carefully orchestrated, tasteful floral arrangements, minimal fanfare, and a succinct message of stability, progress, and renewed commitment to philanthropy. Eleanor spoke for only 10 minutes, but her measured tone and composed demeanor impressed even the cynics. She reiterated the strength of the firm's core businesses and announced a series of philanthropic initiatives focusing on maternal health, an unsubtle nod to her own journey. By the end, the stock saw a modest uptick, a sign that perhaps the market believed Harrington Industries could weather the storm after all. Yet beneath the public facade of a carefully managed transition lay personal entanglements that were far from resolved. Victor watched Eleanor's press conference in his hotel suite, a feeling of muted awe stirring inside him. There she was, the woman he had wronged gracefully, commanding respect from an audience of seasoned journalists and business leaders. He couldn't help but feel a pang of regret, if not for his actions, then for his hubris that had led him here. One evening, as he swirled whiskey in a crystal tumbler, he found his thoughts drifting uncomfortably to the future. Would Eleanor proceed with a divorce? What about the baby? Would he have a place in his child's life? After everything that happened, he knew he had to attempt to fix things, at least in part. Taking a deep breath, he dialed Eleanor's number for the first time since the board meeting. The phone rang and rang until her voicemail picked up. Victor hesitated, then left a quiet message. "Eleanor, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but we need to talk about everything, especially the baby. I'm sorry." He wasn't sure if he expected a reply, but he knew there was no easy path forward without at least confronting the reality of the child they both were responsible for. Outside the Carlyle's windows, the city glistened under a canopy of lights. For the first time in years, Victor Harrington, once the master of the universe, felt entirely unsure of what lay ahead. A week after the historic boardroom coup, Eleanor sat in her mother's sunlit conservatory. Hothouse orchids of every hue framed the glass walls, their vibrant blossoms reminding her that life continued to flourish even in the face of strife. She absent-mindedly rubbed her baby bump, reflecting on the swirl of events that had consumed her life. She was no longer just a wife. She was a major shareholder who had pulled the strings to unseat a billionaire mogul. Yet behind the newfound respect people afforded her lay an ache of betrayal that no corporate victory could mend. Her phone buzzed. Checking it, she found a message from Victor. "Please, let's talk. We owe it to ourselves and our child." Eleanor stared at the words, her heart pounding. After everything that had happened, could she face him? But she also knew that ignoring him forever wasn't an option. they had a child to consider, a future that demanded clarity, if not reconciliation. She typed a brief reply, "Tomorrow noon, the Davenport estate. Bring your attorney." It was a formal invitation, suggesting a calm, structured environment. If they were to negotiate the boundaries of their future, the setting would be one Eleanor controlled. Victor arrived the next day wearing a subdued suit that lacked his usual flashiness. Accompanying him was his personal lawyer, a soft-spoken man who looked uncomfortable from the moment they stepped onto the immaculately trimmed lawns. Eleanor greeted them in the estate's library, flanked by Simone Gold. Polite nods were exchanged, but the tension was palpable. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet," Victor began, clearing his throat. His voice was subdued, none of the brash confidence that once defined him. "I know I've caused you unbelievable pain, and I'm truly sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to ensure that I'm still part of our child's life." Eleanor studied him, trying to reconcile the man she'd once loved with the broken figure before her. "You made a choice, Victor. More than one choice, over and over, to lie to me. You destroyed the trust we had. But yes, you're still the father of this child." Her voice wavered slightly, but she pressed on. "I won't deny you the chance to be in our baby's life if you can prove you'll be a responsible parent." Simone nudged a folder across the polished table. "We have some proposed terms," she explained. "For co-parenting, child support, and possibly spousal support, should Eleanor decide to file for divorce. It's all preliminary, but it provides a framework." Victor shot a quick glance at his attorney, who nodded as he skimmed the documents. Before he could respond, Eleanor raised a hand. "But let's be clear. I expect honesty from here on out. Any more deceptions, financial or personal, and you'll lose access. Is that understood?" Swallowing hard, Victor nodded. "I understand." They navigated the intricacies of child support and visitation schedules with the same formality one would use to negotiate a business deal. Simone outlined how they'd handle expenses related to education, healthcare, and even a trust fund for the child's future. Despite the emotional undercurrent, the conversation remained measured, proving that both parties were resolute in doing what was best for the baby. Outside, the day had turned overcast, clouds gathering like silent witnesses to this fateful meeting. When all the legal points had been addressed, an uneasy silence fell. Victor turned to Eleanor, voice trembling with something akin to remorse. "I know a contract can't fix this, but maybe with time." Eleanor's expression was soft, yet cautious. "I don't know if we can rebuild trust, Victor. Right now, my focus is on our child and on stabilizing Harrington Industries. I won't forgive what you did, at least not yet, but for the baby's sake, I'm willing to keep the door to communication open." Victor sighed, relief and sorrow mingling in his eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you know." After they finished, Simone escorted Victor and his lawyer to the door. Eleanor stayed behind, still seated at the heavy wooden table. The moment the door clicked shut, she buried her face in her hands, a quiet sob breaking through the composure she'd clung to all afternoon. The meeting felt like the formal dissolution of the life she once cherished and the birth of a tentative new arrangement dictated by lawyers and heartbreak. Outside, Victor paused under the estate's grand archway, looking back at the stately manor. He felt an immense sense of loss, of Eleanor, of the carefree world he once believed was his by right. All that remained was the flicker of hope that he might still salvage some shred of dignity or at least fatherhood from the wreckage. As the sun began to set, both of them were left contemplating the precarious path ahead. For Eleanor, there was the daunting task of balancing her new role in the company impending motherhood and the emotional toll of Victor's betrayal. For Victor, a future unspooled that no longer revolved around his unchecked desires. The affair with Bianca had scorched the once verdant life he enjoyed, leaving him to rebuild on whatever scorched earth remained. And standing at the epicenter of it all was a child not yet born, but already shaping the decisions and destinies of the two people who had brought them into this world. 2 months after the boardroom coup, Harrington Industries began to steady under interim CEO Lawrence Porter and Eleanor's quiet but guiding influence. Investor confidence, once shaken, showed signs of recovery. Eleanor, though not officially at the helm, became the moral compass the company sorely needed. Her focus shifted toward green energy in Southeast Asia and philanthropic programs in education and maternal health causes that echoed her personal transformation. While the board rallied behind her strategic insights, Eleanor embraced the final stages of pregnancy in the comfort of the Davenport estate. She and her mother Cecilia carefully prepared the nursery. The estate, adorned with family portraits and fresh blooms, became a sanctuary of reflection and resolve. Eleanor found a strange comfort in her new dual identity, mother-to-be and corporate architect. Victor, meanwhile, lived in quiet exile at the Carlisle Hotel, a far cry from the boardroom he once ruled. He made half-hearted attempts to salvage his image, TV interviews, vague apologies, even an anonymous donation to one of Eleanor's maternal health projects. But the public had moved on. Bianca Suarez had all but disappeared, reportedly in Europe, rebranding her image. Their affair, once blazing with scandal, faded into footnotes in tabloids. Victor's fall was complete. His public charm now rang hollow in empty rooms. Despite all, he still hoped to be part of his unborn child's life. One evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, he left Eleanor a voicemail. "We need to talk. About the baby, I'm sorry." When Eleanor heard the message, she hesitated, but she knew this conversation was inevitable. Her reply was short and firm. "Tomorrow, noon. Here, bring your attorney." The next day, Victor arrived at the Davenport estate, subdued, accompanied by a lawyer who looked as uncomfortable as the situation warranted. In the library, Simone Gold stood by Eleanor's side, and together they laid out terms, co-parenting, financial responsibilities, and strict boundaries. "I won't deny you access," Eleanor said, her tone even. "But if there's any dishonesty, any more games, you'll lose that right." Victor nodded solemnly. "I understand." They negotiated like business partners rather than former lovers. Once the legal matters were handled, an awkward silence lingered. "Maybe," Victor said, voice low with time. "I'm not ready to talk about forgiveness," Eleanor replied, "but for our child's sake, I'll keep the door open." Weeks later, as autumn deepened, Eleanor went into labor earlier than expected. In the pre-dawn hours, amidst the sterile light of a hospital room, she gave birth to a baby boy. Tears filled her eyes as she held him. "Welcome to the world," she whispered, her voice breaking. Victor arrived hours later. She could have turned him away, but didn't. He entered quietly, awestruck by the sight of their son. "He's perfect," he murmured, his hands trembling as he cradled the child. Eleanor watched, uncertain but composed. Despite everything, their son deserved a future rooted in peace, not bitterness. That moment of shared awe, the only one since their world, fractured, offered a flicker of fragile possibility. The scandal had toppled a billionaire, empowered a betrayed woman, and birthed a new legacy. In this dawn-lit hospital room, the next chapter was just beginning. Thank you for joining me on this tumultuous journey of passion, power, and redemption. From a secret Bali getaway that sparked rumors in the tabloids to a dramatic boardroom coup that shook Harrington Industries, we've witnessed how betrayal and ambition can unravel even the mightiest of empires. Yet in the end, we've also seen how strength, dignity, and a fierce sense of purpose can guide us through the darkest storms. Eleanor emerged not just as a scorned wife, but as a formidable force, one who safeguarded an entire company while preparing to welcome new life into the world.